Sarah Martinez had everything a woman could dream of. At 38, she was a successful corporate lawyer at one of the city's most prestigious firms, driving a Mercedes, living in a sprawling suburban home with a pool and perfectly manicured gardens. But more than the material success, she had what she thought was a solid marriage. Michael Martinez, her husband of 12 years, was the kind of man other women envied. Tall, charming, successful in commercial real estate. They met at a charity gala when Sarah was just starting her career. He'd pursued her relentlessly, and she'd fallen hard. Their wedding had been featured in the local lifestyle magazine. For over a decade, they'd built a life together. They had their routines, Sunday brunches at their favorite cafe, date nights every Friday, annual trips to the Caribbean. To everyone who knew them, they were the perfect couple. But perfection, Sarah would soon learn, is often just an illusion carefully maintained. The first sign came 3 months ago. Michael started working late, coming home well after midnight, smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't Sarah's signature scent. When she asked about it, he'd kiss her forehead and say he'd been at a client dinner. She believed him because she wanted to. Then there were the text messages. His phone, which used to sit openly on the kitchen counter, was now always in his pocket, always face down, password changed to something Sarah didn't know. "Why did you change your phone password?" she asked one morning over coffee. "Security reasons," Michael said smoothly. "We had a breach at work. Everyone had to update everything." It sounded reasonable. Everything Michael said always sounded reasonable. But Sarah's instincts, honed by years of cross-examining witnesses and detecting lies in depositions, were screaming that something was wrong. Sarah tried to push her suspicions aside. She threw herself into work, taking on a major merger case that required 80-hour weeks. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe she was being paranoid. But the universe has a way of revealing truths we're afraid to face. It was Jessica Chen, her paralegal, who unknowingly planted the seed that would grow into a terrible certainty. Jessica had been with the firm for 2 years, a bright and ambitious 26-year-old that Sarah had personally mentored. Sarah had taken Jessica under her wing, taught her everything about corporate law, even helped her study for the LSAT. One Thursday afternoon, Sarah noticed Jessica leaving early, which was unusual given their heavy caseload. "Hot date?" Sarah joked. Jessica blushed crimson. "Something like that, with someone special." "Tell me about him," Sarah pressed, genuinely happy for her protégé. "I can't," Jessica said, her eyes darting away. "It's complicated, but I've never felt this way before." Sarah laughed it off, but something about Jessica's reaction stuck with her. The secrecy. The guilt in her eyes, the way she clutched her phone like it held a precious secret. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay next to Michael, watching him breathe, and suddenly remembered that Jessica wore the same perfume she'd been smelling on Michael's shirts. No, it couldn't be. But once the thought took root, Sarah couldn't shake it. Sarah decided to do what she did best: investigate. She started small. She checked the credit card statements Michael thought she never looked at. There were charges at Giovanni's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, on nights when Michael claimed to be working late. There were hotel charges, jewelry purchases from Tiffany's that Sarah had never received. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through months of evidence she'd been too trusting to see. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. Michael said he had a business dinner with potential investors. Sarah, who'd been working on a brief at home, realized Michael had forgotten his vintage Rolex, his father's watch that he never went anywhere without. She decided to surprise him, to bring it to the restaurant. She walked into Giovanni's at 8:47 p.m. The hostess smiled and asked if she had a reservation. "I'm meeting my husband, Michael Martinez?" The hostess's smile faltered just slightly. "Oh, yes, Mr. Martinez. Right this way." As Sarah followed her through the dimly lit restaurant, her heart began to pound. Something felt wrong. And then she saw them. In a corner booth, illuminated by candlelight, sat Michael. He was holding hands with a woman whose back was to Sarah. The woman laughed at something Michael said, threw her head back, and Sarah saw her face. Jessica. Her husband, her mentee, together. Time seemed to stop. Sarah watched as Michael leaned across the table and kissed Jessica. Not a friendly peck, a deep, passionate kiss of two people completely in love. The kind of kiss Sarah hadn't received from her husband in months. Sarah stood frozen, the watch heavy in her hand. The hostess had stopped, waiting for direction, but Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then Michael's hand moved to Jessica's face, caressing her cheek with the tenderness he'd once shown Sarah. And Jessica smiled, that brilliant smile Sarah had been so proud to see in her employee, and said words that Sarah could read on her lips even from across the room. "I love you too." Sarah turned and walked out. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply walked to her car, got in, and sat in the parking lot for an hour, watching couples come and go from the restaurant. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. Her marriage was a lie. Her trust in Jessica was a lie. Her perfect life was built on a foundation of betrayal. When Michael came home that night at 11:30, smelling of wine and Jessica's perfume, Sarah was sitting in the living room in the dark. "Hey, honey," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" "How was dinner?" Sarah asked, her voice eerily calm. "Good, good. Boring investor talk. You know how it is." "Tell me about it," Sarah pressed. "What did you discuss?" Michael launched into an elaborate story about commercial property investments and market trends. He was so smooth, so convincing. He'd probably been lying to her for months, maybe years. Sarah let him finish his fictional tale. "You're a good liar," she finally said. Michael froze. "What?" "I said you're a good liar. I almost believe you, but I saw you, Michael, at Giovanni's, with Jessica." The color drained from Michael's face. What followed was the ugliest night of Sarah's life. Michael tried every tactic in the book. First came denial. "You're imagining things. I was with clients." Then came gaslighting. "You've been so stressed lately, and maybe you saw someone who looked like me." When those didn't work, he moved to anger. "You're always working. You're never home. What did you expect?" And finally, when Sarah's face cold and unmoved, came the tears and apologies. "It meant nothing. It was a mistake. I love you. Please, Sarah, please." But Sarah sat in silence, absorbing every word, filing every excuse away in her mind, because Sarah wasn't just angry. She was calculating. "How long?" she finally asked. Michael hesitated. 3 months. "Don't lie to me anymore. How long?" 8 months, he whispered. 8 months, 2/3 of a year. While Sarah had been working herself to exhaustion, while she'd been mentoring Jessica, while she'd been planning their anniversary trip, they'd been betraying her. "Get out," Sarah said quietly. "Sarah, please!" "Get out of my house. Go to a hotel. I need time to think." Michael left, and Sarah finally allowed herself to break. She cried until dawn, grieving the death of her marriage and the loss of her trust in humanity. But when the sun rose, Sarah wiped her tears, made herself coffee, and began to plan. If Michael wanted war, she would give him war. And in war, Sarah never lost. Sarah called in sick to work the next morning, something she'd never done in her entire career. Then she made a phone call to Marcus Rivers, the best private investigator in the city. They'd worked together on several cases. He owed her a favor. "Sarah, I need everything. Financial records, phone records, surveillance photos, everything." "Sarah, are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked gently. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Within a week, Marcus delivered a file that made Sarah's blood run cold. Michael hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been planning to leave her for months. He'd opened a secret offshore account in the Cayman Islands and had been gradually transferring money from their joint accounts. Over $200,000 of their savings was already gone. The affair had started at a firm holiday party Sarah had skipped due to a court deadline. Michael had driven Jessica home, one thing led to another, and it had been going on ever since. There were hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, even a lease agreement for an apartment Michael had rented for their trysts, all charged to credit cards Sarah didn't know existed. But the worst part was the text messages Marcus recovered. Messages where Michael and Jessica laughed at Sarah, called her the Ice Queen, planned their future together, discussed how they would handle the divorce to maximize Michael's payout. "She'll never see it coming," one message from Michael read. "By the time she figures it out, I'll have secured enough assets to set us up for life." Sarah read every word, committing them to memory. The pain was excruciating, but she forced herself to read them all. She needed to know exactly who she was dealing with. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was a calculating thief who saw her as an obstacle to be overcome. Fine, she would show him what a real obstacle looked like. Sarah returned to work the following Monday with a plan. She acted as if nothing was wrong. Michael had been calling and texting constantly, begging to come home and talk. Sarah finally agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. "I want to work on our marriage," Sarah lied, her voice soft and vulnerable. "Maybe we should try couples therapy." Michael's face lit up with relief. "Yes, absolutely. I'll do whatever it takes." "But I need time," Sarah continued. "I need you to stay at a hotel for a few more weeks while I process this." Michael agreed immediately, not realizing he'd just walked into Sarah's trap. With Michael out of the house, Sarah began her work in earnest. She contacted a forensic accountant who traced every penny Michael had moved. She hired the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state, a woman known for destroying cheating spouses in court. But financial justice wasn't enough for Sarah. She wanted Michael and Jessica to feel the devastation they'd inflicted on her. She started with Jessica. One morning, Sarah called her into the office. "Jessica, I have an important research assignment for you," Sarah said, her voice professionally neutral. "I'm consulting on a high-profile divorce case. The wife discovered her husband's affair with a coworker. She wants to sue both the husband and the affair partner." Sarah watched Jessica's face carefully. The younger woman had gone pale. Is that legal?" Jessica stammered. "Oh yes," Sarah said, pulling out a thick legal file. "It's called alienation of affection and criminal conversation in some states. But even where those specific causes of action don't exist, there's intentional infliction of emotional distress. When someone knowingly pursues a married person, ruins a family, causes documented psychological harm, the damages can be substantial." Sarah opened the file showing Jessica real case precedents. In this case from North Carolina, the affair partner was ordered to pay $8.8 million. In Illinois, a paralegal who had an affair with the partner's husband was sued by the wife and lost her entire career, couldn't find work anywhere in the legal field. Jessica's hands were shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah looked up, her eyes cold. "Because I believe in thorough research. I need you to find every case where the affair partner faced professional and financial consequences. Be detailed. I want everything." Jessica fled the office, and Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. That evening, Jessica called Michael in a panic. Sarah knew this because she'd had Marcus place a listening device in Michael's hotel room. She listened to the entire conversation. "She knows something," Jessica cried. "She's researching cases about suing affair partners. Michael, I could lose everything." "Calm down," Michael said. "She doesn't know about us. She's just working on a case." "No, you don't understand. The look she gave me, she knows." Sarah heard Michael try to reassure Jessica, but the damage was done. Paranoia had set in. Over the next few days, Sarah watched their relationship crumble under pressure. Jessica became withdrawn at work. Michael's calls to Sarah became more desperate. The fantasy they'd built was collapsing under the weight of reality. Then, Sarah made her final move. She scheduled a meeting with Michael at their home. She told him they needed to discuss their future. Michael arrived with flowers and hope in his eyes. "I'm glad you're ready to talk," he said, reaching for her hand. Sarah pulled away and placed a thick manila folder on the table between them. "I'm ready to talk about your affair with Jessica Chen, the $200,000 you stole from our accounts, and exactly how you're going to make this right." Michael's face went white. "Sarah, don't," she cut him off. "I have everything. Every hotel receipt, every text message, every dollar you moved. Marcus is very thorough." She opened the folder, showing him surveillance photos of him and Jessica together, bank statements, copies of their explicit text messages. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah said, her voice like steel. "You're going to sign these divorce papers. You're going to agree to my terms, which include you keeping exactly nothing except your personal belongings and your car. The house, the savings, the investments, all mine. You're also going to pay my legal fees. You can, and I will, because if you fight me, I will drag this through court. I will subpoena Jessica. I will make sure everyone in your professional circle knows exactly what you did, your investors, your clients, your family, and I will pursue both of you for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I may not win, but I'll make sure you spend every penny you have fighting it." Michael's face crumbled. "Sarah, please, we can work this out." "We're past that," Sarah said coldly. "You made your choice 8 months ago. You don't get to unmake it now. Sign the papers, Michael. It's the only deal you're going to get." Michael tried to fight. He hired a lawyer, but Sarah had been 3 steps ahead for weeks. Every asset was documented. Every theft was proven. His attorney took one look at the evidence and advised him to take Sarah's deal. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. Michael lost almost everything. His reputation in their social circle was destroyed when word spread about the affair and the financial theft. Several of his investors pulled out of deals when they learned he couldn't be trusted. Jessica's fall was even harder. Sarah made sure the affair became known throughout the firm. The senior partners, who had zero tolerance for impropriety, quietly let Jessica go. Her promising legal career, which Sarah had helped build, was destroyed by her own choices. Sarah wrote Jessica a letter of recommendation that was professionally worded but subtly devastating. Every law firm in the city that called for a reference got the same message: technically competent, but poor judgment in personal relationships and professional boundaries. Jessica couldn't find legal work anywhere. Last Sarah heard, she was working as a receptionist in another state, her law school dreams abandoned. As for Michael and Jessica's relationship, it lasted 3 months after the divorce. Relationships built on betrayal rarely survive in the harsh light of reality. Without the thrill of secrecy, without stolen moments and forbidden passion, they had nothing in common. Michael blamed Jessica for ruining his life. Jessica resented Michael for not protecting her career. They split up bitterly, each blaming the other for their downfall. 1 year after discovering the affair, Sarah received a call from Michael a year later. He was crying. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," he sobbed. "I lost everything. My career is in shambles. I'm living in a studio apartment, and I lost you, the only person who ever really loved me." Sarah listened in silence. "Can we try again?" Michael begged. "Can you ever forgive me?" Sarah thought about it for a long moment. She thought about the 12 years she'd given him, the trust he'd shattered, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her. "No," she said simply, and hung up. 1 year after discovering the affair, Sarah stood in her home office, looking out at the garden she'd completely redesigned. The pool where she and Michael used to swim had been transformed into a meditation garden with a fountain. Every trace of their life together had been removed or transformed. She'd been promoted to senior partner at her firm, the youngest person ever to achieve that position. She'd thrown herself into work and discovered she was even better at her job without the distraction of a failing marriage. She'd also discovered herself. She took up painting, something she'd always wanted to try. She traveled to Italy, Greece, and Spain, places Michael had never wanted to visit. She reconnected with old friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage. The betrayal had nearly broken her, but instead, it had revealed a strength and resilience she didn't know she possessed. It had burned away the parts of her that were too trusting, too naive, too willing to ignore red flags for the sake of comfort. Sarah had become something harder, sharper, and ultimately, more powerful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Your instincts were right about the Henderson case. Just found proof the CFO was embezzling. You're brilliant." Sarah smiled. She'd rebuilt her life into something better than before, a life built on her own terms, her own strength, her own choices. She poured herself a glass of wine and raised it to her reflection in the window. "To new beginnings," she said to herself, "and to never settling for less than I deserve." Because that was the real lesson, Sarah realized. Revenge wasn't just about making them pay for what they did. Revenge was about reclaiming your power, your dignity, your life. And she had done exactly that. Sarah walked into the courthouse, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. She was representing a client in a major corporate lawsuit, one that would make national headlines. As she passed through the lobby, she saw him, Michael, looking older and worn, in a cheap suit that didn't quite fit right. He was there for a bankruptcy hearing. Their eyes met across the crowded space. For a moment, neither moved. Then Sarah nodded slightly, acknowledging his presence the way you might acknowledge a stranger who holds a door for you, polite but distant. Because that's what he was now, a stranger who once knew her secrets. Michael opened his mouth as if to say something, but Sarah had already turned away. She had a case to win, a career to build, a life to live. The past was buried, and Sarah had no intention of digging it up. Sarah walked into the courtroom, confident and powerful, ready to fight for justice. Because that's what she did best. And this time, she was fighting for herself.